Good morning. This is day 3 of our retreat. If it's your first day joining us, you've missed a couple days, so you're welcome to go back and watch those. And we hope that you'll stick with us through the rest of the week. If this is your first time joining us, I am Amber Severance, and it is my really great privilege to just be with you for a few minutes each morning of this week, sharing something from God's word that's an encouragement to me and hopefully will be an encouragement to you. I love the book of Hebrews a lot, and we're going to spend this morning and the next 2 mornings in the book of Hebrews. And I thought that today would be a good day to think about what we're focusing on. Okay, so our first day, we talked a little bit about our minds and the kinds of things that we should be dwelling on. Yesterday, we talked about prioritizing what matters, right? Giving Christ our day, each day, and every aspect of our day to Him. Today, I'd like to think about what our focus is, and most especially who our focus is on, right? So Hebrews chapter 11, verse 27, and if you're familiar with the Bible at all, Hebrews 11 probably is a familiar passage to you, sometimes called the Hall of Faith. And in this list of people whose faith we are called upon to emulate, there's a large section about Moses, who's such an example to us. But something really stuck out to me the other day when I was reading it. And it's in verse 27. It says, by faith, he left Egypt behind. Moses left Egypt behind, not being afraid of the king's anger. For Moses persevered as one who sees him who is invisible. And that struck me. And I love to think through a verse and how it's set up. And this says, by faith, he left Egypt behind, not afraid of the king's anger. The king, the Pharaoh, the most powerful man on the planet at the time. Moses wasn't afraid of his anger, and he was willing to leave Egypt behind. Why? And in this verse, it says, because Moses persevered, Moses endured as a person who sees him who is invisible. Moses persevered like someone who actually sees God. The God who is invisible, whom no eye has seen or can see. Moses endured those next 40 years, right? Because when he left Egypt, he was in Midian and on his own for another 40 years before God took him back to lead the people of Israel out. So Moses endured as though he saw the one who is invisible. And I wonder about you and me. Do we have a clear picture of the character of God, of who he is, so that we are able to endure and persevere? Look, the book of Hebrews is full of calling Christians to lives of endurance, to lives of perseverance. And we're going to talk about that more tomorrow morning too. But what's the trick? What was the trick for Moses? He saw God. He saw the invisible God. And in reality, God did meet with Moses and give him the 10 commandments. Guess what God has done for us? He's sent Jesus. He has become God in the flesh for us so that we could see Christ, so that we could know him and know how he would walk and talk and behave. we can see Jesus in the pages of Scripture. And then when we know him, he gives us his Holy Spirit to indwell us and to guide us into truth. And so we have God and we can persevere as one who sees him who is invisible. So I just want to encourage you today. Are you taking the time to see God? He reveals himself in the pages of Scripture to you. Do you hunt for him? Do you search for his character? Do you listen to lies about, is God really good? Is God really truthful? Is he really wise? Are those the kinds of questions and doubts that you fuel your heart and mind with? Or do you sink into the pages of Scripture and see the God that has revealed himself to us, a God of truth and a God of faithfulness and a God of wisdom and holiness and justice, a God who will make all things right one day, a God who loves us so much he sent his son to die for us? Are you focusing on him? Or are you focusing on the chaos around you, maybe focusing on your own feelings, your own thoughts, your own wisdom? Don't do that. Let's focus on God. And like I encouraged you on Monday, maybe it's been a while since you've opened your Bible and really taken time to meditate on a passage and study through a passage. And I suggested you do that with Philippians 4:8. How about this? How about this year taking time to focus on the character of God? Find it in the pages of his word. As you're reading, look for the characteristics and the qualities of God and learn them and believe them and follow him. He is the one, the only one who we can trust. He is the unchangeable God who is faithful and true and who does no wrong. So let's trust him, huh? I'm going to pray for us. God, thank you that you are a God who is holy and righteous and who does no wrong. God, I pray for any of my brothers and sisters who might be watching, who are not convinced of your goodness. God, do a work in their hearts. Show them yourself. Show them in the pages of your word, in the beautiful lives of other people who have surrendered themselves to you. God, show them that you are a trustworthy God who does no wrong, that you will make all things right. Thank you that you promise in your righteousness to one day punish evil, reward good, that you take those who know you and love you to be with you forever. Thank you that you've given us your word, that we can study it and learn it and know you. Please, God, please help us to honor you, to know you, to love you. In your name I pray, amen. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
Welcome back to day 3 of Run the Race, a strategic training plan for homeschool success. Today, we are going to be talking all about staying focused. And if you missed the previous 2 days, make sure to go back and watch those. But we're so excited that you're here joining us today. And as a reminder, we will be recording this session as well, so you can come back and watch it again. And make sure if you're watching it live with us that you drop your questions or comments in the chat, because we would love to talk with you as well. And let's dive right in. Today I have 2 new Sonlight mentors with me. So we're going to start with some introductions. Sheila, you are on top, so I'll let you go first. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. My name is Sheila Del Charco, and I have 3 kids that I homeschooled. They're all grown now and out into the world, and so homeschooling worked for us. I also love working as a mentor and encouraging new homeschoolers.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And do you want to tell everyone about yourself?
My name is Ann Keebler, and I am still a homeschool mom. I have one left. I have one in college and one that's a senior. So I'm very rapidly working my way out of my job. But it has been a great journey for sure. I'm one of the mentors on the app, and I also go to conventions. And so hopefully we'll see y'all there this season.
Well, thank you both for being here. If you're tuning in for the first time, I'm Sunny. I'm Sonlight's community manager, and I'm also a Sonlight mom. My kids are currently in 9th and 4th grades, so I have a high schooler and an elementary student. And we're going to be sharing kind of tips and tricks from our own lives today, as well as encouragement for you. So let's talk all about this idea of staying focused on your own race, your own journey. And we'll start by talking about a homeschool why. I know this is something that when I started homeschooling, I didn't really know why I was homeschooling. It was more of a convenience thing that I thought was temporary, and it took me a few years to decide why I was really still doing it. So why is that important? Maybe finding out your reasons why you're homeschooling, especially when things get hard. But then what advice or something would you share with somebody who's maybe trying to determine what their why is, or is that really important? Do you have to have a reason, or can you just be doing this?
Well, I remember when I first learned about homeschooling, my husband is the one who actually introduced it to me. And I was perplexed. I was like, why would you do that? And he sold it to me as like, we could travel when everyone else is in school. We love to travel. So this was before we even had kids. And I was like, that's not a bad idea. But then once I started having kids, I was not one of those moms that couldn't wait to put their kids in daycare or preschool. Like I loved my kids and I wanted to be with them. So I actually started homeschooling with just having a little preschool co-op is what I called it. Some other friends who also had preschool age kids, and we just played. We did on like Tuesdays, we would do games and crafts and story time and, Itsy Bitsy Spider and things like that. And then on Thursday, we would go to the library for story time and play outside. So it started very, very gently. But then when it came time for like, okay, now it's kindergarten, we got to get serious. We actually went and visited all the schools around us, private schools, public schools, magnet schools. Now we have charter schools. There's so many options. And I still didn't see anything that I thought they're going to do a better job than I have been doing. It's kindergarten. How hard can kindergarten be? Like if I screw it up, I can always put my kid in school the next year. And so that's actually how we started. I didn't have a hard and fast why when we first began. I just thought this can't be hard. I enjoy being with my kids. I want to see them succeed. And so we started that way. But then we quickly decided that we needed to have some goals and some whys, because it was very, very, very tempting on those hard days to just call the school up, enroll your kid and put them on the school bus and send them off to school. So it is important to really ponder, with your husband, with the Lord, like, why are you feeling called to homeschool? Is it to be the primary influence in your child's life? Is it because your child is falling through the cracks at school? Like maybe your kid is in school right now and they're falling through the cracks, either because they are super smart and the teacher doesn't have time for that, or they have a learning disability, or they're struggling in some way. And so they're falling further and further behind. Maybe you live far from a school, and so that your kid has to ride the bus for an hour. Maybe they're being bullied. Like there's so many reasons, but I think it is a good idea to come up with some reasons of why you want to try, because it's going to get hard and you need to have those reasons in front of you when you're tempted to just put them back in school on those hard days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my background, I didn't mention this in the intro, but I used to be a public high school teacher. And I always wanted to be home with my kids when we decided to have a family. But I never even thought of homeschooling at all until my son was about 2 years old, and I started to think about it. And all these decisions you make when they're really little. You choose their doctor, and you choose, the routine that you're going to have. Are you going to encourage nap times? And you choose what goes into them food wise. All of these decisions that you're making, and you wanted to just do the very, very best thing for them. And it occurred to me that I wanted that to extend into school too. And like Sheila, we had a little group. I met other people that had preschool age kids, and we did all the story time. And a local church had a little preschool play day, and it was so fun. And we did all those things together. But then, we hit a point where all of them were going to go on to kindergarten, and here I was, the only one and that particular group, that was making a different decision. So you definitely, I think it's important to understand, some whys. Why exactly am I wanting to do this? And it doesn't have to be like you're writing a thesis or anything, for a master's degree. It can be really simple things. Like at the time, I had another child, and honestly, one of my whys was I want my daughter to have her nap time. I don't want to have to drag her out of her crib to go pick up her brother from kindergarten. There are so many, little reasons as to why. Another one of my whys, let's see, I guess I already mentioned, just kind of wanting to be the one. I don't know, maybe we homeschoolers tend to like to be in control of things. Maybe, I wanted to choose the curriculum. I got my hands on the Sonlight catalog and just fell in love with it. So I have used Sonlight from the very beginning, and just being the one to be there with your kids. And I remember all of the photos on Facebook, the first day of kindergarten, and all these people were so sad and, leaving their kids behind and, in a different place. And man, we were just living it up, reading books all day and just having the best time. So, and like Sheila said, when the tough gets going, and it will, when you're in there day in and day out, 24/7, those times will happen. And I remember in particular one where I think my son was about in the second grade or so. And I don't know, we had just had a few tough days in a row. And man, I got online and looked up our local private school, and I saw the cost. I thought, oh, okay, I think we really do need to make this work after all. And so we did. It was a season, that passed. But it definitely helps to remember, why you decided to do this in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you both said, because that resonated so much with me, my own experience. And then even as now, I do have very strong reasons for why, but I kind of accidentally started homeschooling is what I like to say. I was homeschooled for a year myself, but I also went to private school. I went to public school. So I had experienced all the school options growing up. And so I guess I was a little more open to it, but I never thought that I would homeschool. But we happened to be moving when my daughter was preschool age, and I wasn't quite sure where we were going to live. And so it really came down to, oh, if I start something with her, we'll just enroll her in school once we get where we're going, and it'll be fine. It's preschool. I'm not going to mess it up. It can't be that hard. And so I started with Sonlight's preschool program with every intention of putting her in school in kindergarten. But I saw her, like the light bulbs were going off, and I was seeing her learn all these new things. And that was exciting for me. I love learning, and I was like, oh, this is so cool to see her doing these things, experiencing these things. And I thought, okay, we can do it one more year. And we just kept doing it a year at a time like that till she was in about second grade. At this point, my son had been born. He's 5 years younger, and I was working full time. And I got to a point where I say that those early years, for me at least, have always been the hardest years up to about second or third grade, because your child needs so much from you. They're not super independent yet. And I was trying to figure out, how am I going to work while I have a toddler, while I have the second grader who still needs me for a lot of different things. And so that was the first time that I really thought, okay, do I put her in school? That would be easier. And then I can keep working, because I really did not want to give up my job. I really enjoy work. That's really the whole reason that I continue trying to do both. But then when I started looking at the schools in the area and thinking about it, I started to feel sick at all the things that we were going to miss out on. And like Anne said, I realized, wait, I need to figure out how to make this work. Like, I know I want to keep homeschooling. And so that was really when I realized, wait, there's nothing that any of the schools can offer that these kids are not getting at home with me. And in fact, I feel like they're getting a lot more at home with me than they are or would be in school. And so now, as they've gotten older, I remember when my daughter was getting close to high school, somebody said, "Oh, are you going to put her in school for high school?" And I said, "Why? What can they offer her that is better than what she already has?" And so now I feel very confident in that. But it definitely took a while. And I think, like these two ladies have said, when things get tough, if you know why you're doing it, it's going to be easier to stick with it. But start making those pros and cons lists so that when it does get hard, record the good things when they're happening, so that way you can remember those good things, because it does make it a lot easier. And now I'm like, no matter what's going on, I'm going to make it work because I know this is what's best for my kids. So that's why I think that is so important. But let's talk a little bit about that. When you're homeschooling, you're doing something different. And I know even after my years of homeschooling, there are still times that I'm like, oh, I feel like they're looking at us as being weird or odd because we're not doing what everybody else does. Or, sometimes you might have that. Is the grass greener on the other side? Would my life be easier or better if I sent my kids to school? So what would you tell someone who's maybe struggling with that right now? Either they feel like they're a target, everywhere they go, people ask them questions or, kind of insult the fact that they're homeschooling, or they just feel like life would be easier maybe if they weren't.
From my perspective as a former public school teacher, I have experienced that there is nothing better than the student-teacher ratio that you get, than when you're homeschooling. There is nothing better than that. And I tutor part-time, and so I have a maximum of 3 kids, at a time, and they a lot of them are public school students, and they comment how wonderful it is to have such a small student-teacher ratio. And that really is something to keep in mind, that people that aren't homeschooling may not even think about that. I know they think about all the opportunities and all the things that the schools can offer, but really there's hardly anything that they can offer that we can't in some way, and in some way we can offer a little bit more. So, if you're ever thinking about, oh, well, maybe it's greener on the other side, well, remember those whys, that's definitely important. But think about all this list of pros, that you had. And when you're coming back really late from a T-ball game, and your kids get to sleep in and actually be refreshed, when they're starting school the next day. There are so many little things that happen day in and day out, and where you can go to visit the museum during a weekday when it's not busy and really get to look at all the things and learn. There are just so many things. So the different is so good in so many ways. And when people don't understand it, honestly depends on their relationship with you. If it's just some total stranger in the grocery store, well, oh, are you sick? You're not in school. You can just very politely say, oh no, we're doing very well. We're homeschooling. If it's somebody that you're close to that really wants to, to understand or really has a concern, and you can have a deep conversation with them and talk about, all the detailed reasons. So in some ways, it all depends on who you're getting the feedback from. Consider that too.
Yeah, I would agree with Ann with that, especially depending on how close they are to you. That depends on the kind of response that I give them. So if they truly want to understand, then I give them my list of whys. I want to be the primary influence in my child's life. I want to be there for them when they encounter difficult things, and I want to be the one to have those hard conversations with them. I want to take time if they need time. I want to speed things up if we need to speed things up. 2 of my 3 kids are dyslexic, so we did things a little differently. They're also ADD. I think those 2 things go hand in hand, and I just can't imagine what they would have been like in school, because I gave them the freedom to wiggle, to squirm and things like that. So if they truly care, then I give them those kinds of reasons. If they're just being judgmental, then you have to kind of have thick skin But you kind of have to have thick skin to be a parent, right? Because I mean, everyone's going to judge you for every parenting decision you make. Oh, you're not going to breastfeed, you're going to use the bottle, or you're going to, you're not going to use the bottle, you're going to breastfeed. I mean, like, there's two camps for every argument, whether you schedule them to the latest minute, oh, it's only 2:05. They have to go, they have to sleep until 2:15. I'm not going to get them out of their crib until 2:15. Or they'll nap when, in the stroller, whatever. It's no big deal. So, you have to have a thick skin to be a parent. You have to have thicker skin to be a homeschool parent, because you're going to get comments from the peanut gallery, whether it's your parents, whether it's your in-laws, whether it's your siblings or your husband's siblings or other family, great Aunt Susie or whatever, or at the grocery store, when people comment and you're out and about and your kids aren't in school. So it's good to kind of think through some of the answers to the common questions. The most common one, if you haven't heard this one yet, you will. Well, what about socialization? So, and I had a smarty come back to that. And I also had a very gentle comeback to that. Again, depending on who was asking, what the situation was, I had a variety of ways to respond. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's helpful too, I think, if you prep your younger kids, like even if you don't call them a certain grade, like tell them what grade they would be in, because people who don't know what to say to children will say, oh, where do you go to school? Or what grade are you in? And when they look at you like, I don't know, it makes it awkward for them. It makes it awkward for you. So my kids always knew what grade they would have been in school. And I don't remember which of my kids it was, but somebody had come up to them and said, oh, where do you go to school? And they said, I don't. And that was all they said. And so then I was like, nope, you need to tell them you're homeschooled. So we kind of went through conversations when the kids were really little with like, oh, these are the types of things people are going to ask you. It's just because they don't know what to say to a 7-year-old, right? It's not that they're attacking you or anything like that, but you need to have some answers ready so that they don't just look at you like, you don't go to school, what? Because then that puts you as the parent in kind of an awkward place. It's funny because my children are both more outgoing than I am. So I think that's why I kind of prepped them, because I figured I didn't want to attract that attention to myself. I was like, I'm running my errands, like I'm on a mission here. But like Sheila and Ann said, depending on who it is, who you're getting those comments from, what I have found is if I'm not defensive when I go into the conversation, sometimes it really is people that are just curious. They don't know anyone that's ever been homeschooled, and they're like, oh, how does that work? What do you do? Like, can you do that outside of the home? Like Ann said, if you're at the grocery store during the day, when are you getting school done? Like it's just curiosity. But then you will have the people who, think their way is better, whatever that way is. And so they might be a little more judgmental. And I love what you guys said, depending on who it is, right? If it's somebody you really care about that's close to you, close to your kids, that's a different conversation than a random passerby at the store or anything like that. But I do think, yes, like what Sheila said, to be a parent, I think you discover that in pregnancy when everybody has comments about how you're carrying your child as a pregnant woman, starting then you realize like everybody has comments and they're going to share some of those with you. But being comfortable in, why am I doing this? And these are my kids. God's called me to do this. Just because I love homeschooling doesn't mean I think you should be homeschooling. I think sometimes people kind of come at it because they're feeling maybe a little convicted that they're not homeschooling their own children. Or at least that's been my experience. Like they feel like I might be judging them when I'm not. I'm just sharing what I love about homeschooling and how great it's been for us. So yeah, really, really holding on to, why am I doing this? Am I comfortable with my decision? Do I feel this is what God's called us to do? And how to raise our own kids. That helps when you end up in kind of those awkward situations where you may not know what to say. Let's talk about eliminating distractions, though, as a homeschool parent, whether that be you're comparing yourself to other homeschool families, you are really worried about the opinions of other people, or overcommitting yourself. I know sometimes because we're homeschooling and we do have more freedom and flexibility, we have a tendency to do too many things. So how would you encourage people to eliminate distractions or really hone in on what they can do versus what they might just want to do, and how to handle those situations?
Well, I think the biggest thing today in this day and age, the biggest distractor is the phone. I really do. When I first started homeschooling, I'm of that age where smartphones weren't out yet. And so that wasn't, I mean, we still had phones, but it wasn't a smartphone. And so it wasn't quite as distracting. But I had made the commitment that I'm not going to answer the phone. We're going to let it go to the machine. Back in the day, we had answering machines. So I would let the machine pick up, and unless it was something like, oh, I was waiting for that doctor to call, then I would pick up. But otherwise, just as if I were a school teacher in a classroom, I would not be answering my home phone or my personal phone. I wouldn't pick up the phone. And so that takes discipline, because those things are pretty addictive. And so, we have this reaction to just, oh, let me just check who that text was, or, oh, let me, whatever. And so I think that is going to be a big thing. So either you put it on do not disturb, airplane mode, put it on in the other room, and just let people know that, hey, during homeschooling, I'm not going to be answering the phone. So do not text me, or if you text me, do not expect a response right away. I think that's probably the biggest thing. But the second thing too is to limit the amount of activities that you allow yourself to be involved in, whether that's you yourself, through church, Bible study. I have a friend who is very involved in MOPS. She is the mother of 9 kids, and she's involved. She's a MOPS leader. They go to community Bible study and they homeschool, but she has carved out the time so that, community Bible study for them is their Bible curriculum. So that's their school, and MOPS for them is their service. So this is how their kids serve too. But I can't imagine, on top of that, adding scouts and sports and art classes and all the other things. There are just so many things out there, and there's more and more things out for homeschoolers as well, because people have figured out, like, oh, they're available when all the other kids are in school. So we'll offer a homeschool class at 11 o'clock and we'll just get more money that way, and so those are good. I'm not saying don't do them, but you have to decide how many of them is manageable and how many of them is just not for this season. Everything is a right for a season, and you figure out, this is the season that we're going to do soccer, and then we're going to take some time off of soccer and we're going to do art lessons. So you can, alternate between the arts, the fine arts, and the sports. And, maybe you allow one child to do one thing, but with 3 kids, if you let all of them do 3 things, you're never home and you're not getting school done. So you really do have to limit. And so for our family, we did limit to 1 sport. And typically it was the same sport, because my kids did all play soccer. So that was pretty easy. But I know families who play football and baseball, and they're at different fields, different days. And, they even have to use grandma and grandpa to help, you carry this kid to there, because I got to take that kid to there. And so that's just a decision you need to make. But if you say yes to this, that means you're saying no to something else. And maybe it's dinner time together as a family. Maybe it's time to spend with grandma and grandpa, we only have so much time. And so if you're going to spend it over here, then that means you don't have it to spend over here. It's just the way it works out. So
yeah, that is so true. Anything is a give and take. It really is. And I'm wondering if either of you have seen the attitude of where people think, oh, well, she's a homeschool mom. She's at home all day. She has time to do blah, 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 when you get asked to do all these things. So it can happen. So you definitely have to keep in mind what your priorities are. Do you want to be able to eat dinner once or twice a week together, that kind of thing, and make sure that all the commitments you have, allow you to do the things you want to do. And I like how Sheila said, everything is a season. And it can be so tempting to think, oh no, we haven't tried baseball, and we haven't tried soccer, and, my kid's going to miss out on all these things, but there's years and years, to do all of this. And so you definitely need to realize that the marathon that you're running, it's not a sprint. You don't have to do all the things at the same time. No, no matter how tempting that might be. And the thing about, comparing yourself to others is a real a temptation, I guess you would say, because you see how this family is doing, such and such, and maybe you wish you had similar finances that they did so that you could do those things, but you've been put in the spot where you've been put, and it's no accident. And so it's definitely something that we all need to be aware of, is to be conscious of where we are at this point in time, and what the gifts are that God has given us during this point in time, and just to keep all that in mind.
Yeah, I love oh, go ahead.
One more thing I wanted to say about that too was it's so tempting when you see a family who they all play the violin and you think, oh, my kid needs to play the violin, but they're not good at the violin, or they're just not musically gifted. Like, it's okay that your kid isn't the soccer star and the violin player that's playing on the junior youth orchestra or whatever, and the artist, and the like there's so many things. So we would try something, like we tried t-ball. My kids liked it. Okay, they really liked the snow cone at the end. That's what they really liked. So we're like, okay, you know what? It's not us. Let's move on. So we tried it once, and we didn't force it, just because my husband loves baseball. He would have loved to spend, his time at the baseball field, but my kids weren't into that. So we tried it, and then we moved on. So it's okay to try things and not force your kid to do 20 years of piano lessons if they really hate the piano,
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I'm very much like a perfectionist by nature. And for years, like, I would never quit anything. Like, I might move and I'd go somewhere else, but I just felt like I couldn't quit stuff. And I love that you brought that up about the sports, that you can try it. And yeah, that doesn't mean 20 years of doing that sport. Because really, if you look at your adult self, right, how often do we say, oh, I think I'd like to try that? We try something, we either love it and we do it for 20 years, or we don't love it and we stop doing it. So yeah, I know when it came to sports, I was like, is this child going to become a professional athlete? The odds of that are not that great. So are they having fun? Are they enjoying it? Love what you said about the snow cone. Because when my daughter was dancing, we did the dance team thing for a while. Her favorite thing was hanging out with her friends backstage. She liked performing, but it wasn't the dance itself. She didn't really care, as long as she got to hang out with her friends and be on stage. So then we transitioned more to theater, because we realized that was actually going to be a better fit for what she wanted to do, and a lot less money. So it was not the time commitment or the cost or any of those things. So yeah, I think really honing in on, what do my kids like to do? What do we as a family like to do? I love what you guys said about, do we want to be home for meals? Is this an important priority to our family? If it is, maybe we don't overcommit and do all the activities that are going to keep us away at dinner time. Something else, when you mentioned meals, it made me think about something that we did in our family, is to make things easier and eliminate all of the distraction. My younger child loves to eat many times a day. He's a grazer. And I know some of you have a lot of kids that want to be in the kitchen all day. So I taught him from a very early age how to prepare simple meals for himself, so that I was not chained to the kitchen all day long. And so we kind of now, breakfast, lunch, whoever's hungry, they kind of eat what they want and they clean up after themselves. And dinner is our meal together. But then that takes stuff off my plate, because now I only have to feed everybody one time a day. They're feeding themselves the rest of the time. And so yeah, finding little things like that that might work for your family, I think is really the best way to go about things, and not worry about what everybody else is doing. Sheila, you mentioned the phone. That makes me think of social media, which is often where we compare ourselves, like, oh, look what so-and-so's doing. That might be the one day that things worked out well for them, that they took that photo and shared it online. So just remember that, like, most of the time they're probably in pajamas with kids hanging off the couch and a mess everywhere. It doesn't look like this picture perfect Pinterest or TikTok life most of the time. And so, yeah, I just remind myself, okay, if things are a mess, if things are not working out, this is temporary. It is not going to be my whole life. And eventually it won't look like this anymore. I won't be homeschooling anymore. But what other people are doing really doesn't matter, because this is my journey, my race that I'm on. And so try to hold on to that if you are struggling with trying to be like everybody else. And let's talk about this idea of education and lifelong learning. I think it's something that as homeschoolers, we really get to reframe what education is to our children. It's not just the school model of sitting in a classroom and memorizing facts. You get to truly learn for learning's sake. So let's talk about that a little bit, kind of the advantages there, and then ways to encourage that lifelong learning in your children if they are at a stage where they're saying, oh, I don't want to do school, I don't like school. If you feel like you're kind of up against a wall, butting heads with a student who may or may not want to be doing the work that you're asking them to do.
I go back a lot to my past, my distant past when I was a public school teacher. And the things that I saw instilled in the students were, is it for a grade? And if it's not, well, then why do I need to do it? That kind of thing. And I definitely, obviously, I understand you have to take grades when you're, going through public school, because that's really the only way that they can determine if you're, getting what you need to get and passing and things like that. But I realized when I started homeschooling that it's a lot easier to instill, learning just for the sake of learning, not because it's for something else or for somebody else. It's just more of a lifestyle. And so that's one of the things I really wanted to implement. And I am in a state that does not require me to turn in any records or anything. So I did not keep grades until we got closer to transcript time. Then you have to have some sort of grade on the transcript to, to be able to do whatever you want in the future. And that was really freeing to not have to be bound by that anymore. So that's definitely a way that homeschooling redefines education. And just the whole atmosphere of it. I live in a small house. We don't have a whole room dedicated just to school. So we are, we're sitting on the couch 99% of the time. If you put something, have a hard binder, it can be your desk. You don't even have to sit at a table for most things. And so it's being together on the couch all the time has just been so good. But so you have to really get away from the traditional, thinking about you've got to be sitting still while you're learning, all that kind of thing. A story that always pops up in my mind when we were sitting on the couch reading, and all of a sudden my son just pops up and runs out of the room. And so I stop and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what is going on? I've got to have a talk with him about how, that was rude. That's not what we do. We're during school. You've got to, stay here and listen. But what was he doing? He came back and he brought this book back off of his bookshelf. And he said, well, when you were reading such and such, it reminded me of this. And he went to go get it and talk about it. And so, oh my goodness, that's just a little small example of just a lifestyle that you're, creating where just learning happens all the time. And they can make all these connections just because of, how it is. It's just your lifestyle.
Yeah, I agree with Ann. It is definitely a lifestyle. I mentioned that all three of my kids are grown and out of the home and they're working, and I still see that they love to learn. Now, my oldest, I will say, he did want to go to school. So he did go to a private high school. And I said, okay, this is your choice. I am not sending you to school. We always said we would do it 1 year at a time as long as it was working for both of us. And so we got to the point where it wasn't working for him and he wanted to go to school. I said, but I'm going to warn you, there's going to be projects. There's going to be things you have to group things. And I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. This is your choice. You're going to do it. You have to get yourself up in the morning and fix your own lunch and all the things that go with going to school. And so as a freshman, he did. And there were times I recall him saying, I have a quiz, but I have an A in the class. If I get an F in the quiz, like he was working the system. He figured that as long as I got a C on this quiz, it wasn't going to affect my grade. And my other two kids were like, you can just choose not to do well on a quiz. Like, what? Like, we didn't have quizzes, but we did the work. Like, my kids got A's because we didn't move on until we had completed the work. And so I'd like to say we're a mastery-based program because we didn't move on until we mastered it. And so if we mastered it, then we got an A. And if we didn't master it, then we didn't move on. And so they learn these things. Like Anne said, is this going to be on the test? Do I really need to know this? Like, that's not a good way to approach learning. I mean, yes, I get, I can only learn so much. I'm not going to be able to retain it all. How much of this is going to count for my final grade? But if the goal is to really learn, then who cares if you're going to remember this minutia factoid that you're not going to know in 3 years? Like, down the line, if you still don't remember the periodic table in 10 years, it's okay, but at least you know what a periodic table is and how it functions and things like that. So, so for me as a homeschool mom, my goal was to get them to enjoy what they were doing, so they would want to do it, and so that they were interested enough to retain the information for as long as possible. I mean, I'm telling you, your memory starts to go when you hit a certain age and you forget all kinds of things. So I know that just because you memorize it for that 12th grade exam doesn't mean you're going to remember it when you're 35. Forget when you're 55, So that goal of memorizing in order to pass a test, I just hate it, because it's not helping kids to absorb information in a more natural way. It is this absorb and dump, absorb and dump, absorb and dump. And that's just not learning. That's working a system.
Right. And what Sunny was talking about, how we can encourage lifelong learning. I think that homeschooling with the literature-based curriculum really helps the kids, your children, see that lifelong learning process, because, man, did I learn right along with them. And they knew that. They knew that I was learning things that I didn't remember or maybe never knew before. And so it really is a great model, to go throughout school. And just going back one more time to the testing. So I do have one in college, and he going through Sonlight, he never had a history test in his life. We ended up with math tests with the curriculum. We ended up with science tests that came with our high school curriculum, but we never had a history test at all. Well, it just wasn't a big deal that he had never had a history test before. He went in his class, studied, listened to the lectures, took the notes, had the discussions, and so far he's made all A's in every history test. So I'm not saying that to brag about it. Of course, I'm proud of him, but just to let everybody out there know that even though it looks so different, Sonlight really has totally defined what education is compared to the traditional style, but it really does work.
Yeah, and I love what you said about that he still did well on that test, because like what Sheila mentioned with her son going to school, he was able to figure out, oh, how do I work the system? What can I drop? What can I not? But if you've done Sonlight and you've done it mastery based, which is the way I do it too, like we don't move on. You don't get to do it halfway. If you think about adult life, you don't get to mess up or do it halfway at work and then it just stays that way, right? You have to keep working on it until it's correct. And when you approach life with more of that mindset, even in a classroom setting, like what you were saying, Anne, your son was able to do the work, make the good grades, do the things he needed to do for this college class. But yeah, I think that's so important. Something else that you guys were talking about like when you memorize stuff for a test and then you dump it out of your head. I remember too very much taking that approach to school, like, oh, I'm going to memorize everything. I'm going to make my A. Then I don't care about it anymore. But I also took things at face value a lot more, because it was like, oh, this is the right answer for the test. So I've learned the right answer. I did not think critically about anything. It was just, oh, this is the right answer for this test. And it really was not till I was in my early 20s where I was did all these new things were coming at me, these new ideas and thoughts and things I hadn't heard before, that I really stopped to think about anything and didn't just believe what I was told. And I think especially now with all the information that's available online, and then we've already lightly touched on social media, but all the opinions and things that are put out there as facts, your kids have to be able to think critically, and they have to be able to figure out, well, wait, why do I believe the way I do? Why is this different than this thing somebody else is telling me? And do I believe them, or do I believe what I've been taught, or let me think through this and figure out, how I actually feel about it. And I'm already seeing that with my high schooler in listening to her conversations with her friends, that Sonlight has equipped her so much better than I was at that age, because she's already learned to look at, oh, well, this person has a different perspective than this one does, and why, and and find those gray areas, right, where it isn't just a black and white, this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer. It's like, oh, well, that might be right in this situation, but maybe not in this situation. And so, yeah, the Sonlight approach, like you guys said, of using literature and showcasing those different perspectives, your kids are really, they're learning to analyze things in a way that I know I did not as a student in school, just trying to make an A on a test. And then that whole lifelong learning kind of comes as a result of that, I think, when they realize, like, oh, I can really dive deep into this subject that I'm interested in, and oh, that's really cool. And you don't have the classroom pressure of maybe like, oh, that's nerdy, you're a loser, or like other kids making fun of you for getting really excited about something. You're able to realize, like, oh, learning about this is really fun and it is cool to me, and I don't have that, classroom stereotype to worry about, because kids are so, worried about what other people think of them when they're in an environment where they get to hear what other people think of them. But in your home, where you're supporting them and loving them, they're able to be who they are and get excited about things without that fear of judgment, if you will.
Or not having an authority figure tell you this is what you need to know. Like, I can just go read about this and learn about it on my own. I don't need to have a teacher, an expert, a class, a test in order for me to learn whatever it is. My son, who's 28 now, he started to teach himself to code because he thought that would be cool. I mean, he didn't go take a college level class on coding. He got a book. He did some YouTube tutorials. He did some trial and error, and he figured it out, And that's what I want for my kids. I want them to not be afraid to do the research, find what they need to find, find the information that they need, and then read up on it, because that's how you learn, really.
Exactly. Yeah. And that also takes the pressure off you if you're feeling like, how am I going to teach my child everything they need to know by high school graduation? You're not going to teach them everything they know. You are teaching that, or they need to know. You're going to teach them lots of things. Like you both mentioned, I learned way more with Sonlight than I think I ever knew before, or I forgot it all. I'm not sure, but I'm learning constantly doing Sonlight with my kids. But you're also teaching them how to learn. So when they get to college for their career, or just like you said, Sheila, your son had an interest in coding, if they, have something that they want to learn, they're able to do that. And it's not the, oh no, I don't know this, what am I going to do now? Well, okay, let's figure it out. We know what to do now. So yeah, all of those advantages, I think, just using literature and homeschooling in that very comfortable environment, like that's something that you don't have to worry about the pressure, I think, of school. What have you mentioned? Sleeping in, all of those things. You're in a comfortable environment, which is more conducive to learning anyway. But let's talk about another advantage to homeschooling, and that's the ability to really disciple your kids, because you are there. You are having those deep discussions that you may not be having, probably aren't having if they're off at school all day. What would you guys say about that? And maybe how would you, if somebody's struggling with that right now, how would you encourage them to move forward?
I would say discipling my kids is actually one of those whys that I came up with a long, long time ago, because I had this vision, or more of a nightmare in my head. I could, because we always would hold hands and pray around the dinner table or lunch table, and I just had this picture in my head of my son going off to kindergarten and looking for somebody's hand to hold to pray with when it was time to eat lunch. And it just like, I can't just send him away at this young, tender age of 5, out on his own. But being able to disciple your kids, I think one of the most important things is that when they're living with you and they're homeschooling with you, 24/7, basically, you are their example. And while that, man, does that put a lot of pressure on you, but they realize that, we're all human, we're all sinners, but who do you want to be showing them how you treat other people, when you make mistakes, how do you, say I'm sorry and ask for forgiveness. And you want that to be within your home, within your family, because you don't know what kind of example they're going to get, when they're 8 hours a day, somewhere away from you. So the verse in Deuteronomy, I jotted this one down to remember the exact verse, but from Deuteronomy 11:9 is basically saying, you are to teach God's word to your children when you sit and when you walk and when you lie down and when you get up. And so homeschooling allows you to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, it really does humble you, because like Ann said, they are watching you. And so you have got to be walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Like, it's so easy to say, oh, you should read your Bible. But if you're not reading your Bible, so you really do need to set the example for your kids to model for them what a personal relationship with Christ looks like. And then to be open to conversations, like even things like the birds and the bees. Like, we never sat down and had the talk. Like, it was just a natural thing that we would just talk about, and they would hear things and they weren't afraid to ask things. And so we could talk about them. But that's also spiritual matters. And I will say, I have 3 kids. None of them are walking with the Lord right now, but we are still praying for them. We are modeling it for them. We still have great relationships with them because we are not shoving it down their throats. They know what we believe. When they're in our home at Christmas time, we held hands and prayed. We say grace over meals, and they expect that because they've had that all their lives growing up. They may not be doing that on their own, but they're not like, I'm not doing that. They honor us and they join in with us, and we aren't afraid to believe what we believe and to act how we want to act. And our hope is that when it comes down to it, they will then come to us when they're ready to come back. And, that is my biggest prayer. That is my biggest wish. Lord, this is my one prayer. I don't want anything else. I don't need riches or anything else, but I want my kids to come back to you. And so I think he does it to keep me praying for other prodigals. I have lots of friends who are in the same boat, and I pray for their kids by name. It keeps me humble, because it sure would be easy to say, oh, I homeschooled my kids and look at these super Christian people that I raised. It keeps me from becoming prideful. But it's still going on. I am still discipling my kids, even though they are grown up and adults, because they do value our opinions. They will call, especially my oldest son. He calls his dad all the time, and he's got questions about work, like ethical kinds of things, and my husband can walk him through it. And Thomas, this is what I would do. This is what I would say. This, and he's like, yeah, Dad, you're right. You're right. He really values Michael's opinion. He sees that he's successful at work, but that he is the real deal at home. Like, he's not just talking it, he is living it. Like, he's authentic. And I think that's the biggest thing. So I tell you this with all my honesty and transparency, because you may be tempted to think, oh, but if I homeschool, my kids will look like ABC, and they may not. And that doesn't mean that you did a bad job. I had to preach this to myself, because I was beating myself up thinking, I used the wrong curriculum. I didn't read enough Bible stories. I should have. And that was the enemy trying to, whisper in my ear and bring me down. But no, discipleship happens in the cracks in your daily, when you sit and when you stand, when you lie down and when you get up. That is when discipleship happens. And I'm holding to the scripture, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. They're not old yet. I'm old. They aren't old.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love, what you guys said about modeling that to them, and like Sheila, even though they are not living life the way you would like them to, they know where you and your husband stand. They know your values, they know your faith. And like you said, you're going to keep doing what you believe is right and keep praying for them. I absolutely love that. And then, Anne, you said something that reminded me about, like, it is a weight, and it is convicting to be like, okay, I need to, apologize when I lose my temper, or when I don't treat people the way I should, because they need to see this. I am their example, and I need to model that and show them what forgiveness looks like. And because of course siblings, they're going to fight with each other. So how do we work on those relationships with each other? Yeah, and it's so much more than just, oh, I'm going to teach you math, I'm going to teach you how to read, right? Like I feel like when I look back at our experiences thus far, most of what I remember is, how did we interact with each other during the day, or what time did we spend together? Where were the places we went? Who did we impact? Those types of things, more than the, oh, sure, I taught you how to read, or we learned about Lewis and Clark this week, or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think it does give you that.
And that's
Go
what
ahead, Sheila.
socialization is, right? That is passing
Yeah.
on the social norms to the younger generation. That's the true definition of socialization. And that is an adult responsibility, not a child's responsibility. So that's what you're doing when you are modeling that for kids. You are socializing them so that they know the correct behavior in our society.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love to, when they get used to interacting with an adult, they're able to talk to an adult. So, a lot of times young kids, if they've only been in school, they might be able to talk to their teacher, but they're very shy and awkward around adults just because, oh, I don't know that person. But both of my children, including my quieter child, are able to talk to adults. They can answer questions, they can say please and thank you. And yeah, it's because I've taken them with me places, and I've modeled how you interact with people. I mentioned I'm not super outgoing, but I do know how to behave and socialize, interact with people when I'm running errands and things like that. And so you are able to model those. Something else too, it does keep you accountable. What have you mentioned? Like, how are you going to encourage them to read the Bible if you're not? And it's so funny because we're recording these in January, and my daughter came up to me the other day and she said, I think I'm going to do this Bible reading plan this year. What are you doing? Do you want to do it with me? And I was like, oh, wow, look at you bringing this to me. Like, I did not even have time to think about what Bible reading plan I was going to do this year. And she, as a high school kid, was like, I think I'm going to do this one. Do you want to do it with me? And so these things that I'm like, I don't, did I teach her this? Is she just learning this? Like, I don't know. But I'm getting to see kind of what our relationship will be like when she's grown, I think. And more like, hey, you want to do this with me? And I'm still her parent, but also I know her very well. She knows me very well. She feels comfortable in coming to me with those things. And yeah, it's not a, okay, today we're going to talk about reading the Bible. It's a natural part of life because we've always done it with Sonlight. So yeah, if you're in the early stages and you're like, oh my gosh, how is this going to work out? I love both of what you guys said, that how it works out, and how you get to know those kids, and they know they can trust you with information, they can come to you with things. I love that so much, and it really, hopefully we are encouraging you that way. Before we wrap up though, do you guys have any other encouragement that you would like to offer about staying focused, whether somebody is just starting out or they've been doing it a very, very long time and they feel like they still have many more years to go? How would you encourage them today?
I think the thing that I want to say is that you're not alone. It can feel very lonely. A classroom teacher has other classroom teachers around her, and you can feel very isolated, especially if you don't have anyone else in your life, a sibling, close friend or whatever, who is also homeschooling. So it can feel very isolating, but you don't have to be alone. You can reach out and seek community. You can see if there are any homeschool groups in your actual physical community, and you can connect with homeschoolers there. There are state organizations that keep records of groups in your state, so you could seek some out there. But we also have an online community. If you live out in the boonies and there's really no one around you, you can connect with us on the Sonlight Connections app, and you will be with other people who are also going through life very similar to you. And so it's just a great place to be encouraged. You don't want to compare yourself, but you also don't want to be a lone ranger. So there's this delicate balance between seeking out community, but then not being like, I'm not doing it like, Susie's doing it. So my encouragement to you is just find someone that you can connect with, that you can pray for one another. You can ask questions, my kid isn't reading well, and is this okay? Is this normal? And just get some feedback when there are problems. And then you can be that for someone else, iron sharpens iron. Titus 2 model. I mean, there's so many things that we could go into. But so my encouragement to you is to not do it alone. Seek out help when you need it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And if you don't have community in person, then come join us on the app.
Yeah, ditto to all of that, Sheila, for sure. So I'll just add one other little thing, encouragement, since we're talking about staying focused. And we've talked about how, this is a marathon, no matter where you're getting into it, unless it's your kid's senior year, then that's pretty short. But, most people are going to be in this journey for a few years. And I think it's important to realize that every little part of your journey is a season. And if you are really enjoying the season that you're in, take all the pictures and write everything down so you don't forget any of it. And if it's kind of a tough season that you're in, be encouraged that it is only a season and it will pass. I remember the season where my children were in younger elementary school, and it was like neither one of them was ever content on the same day. One was, fussy, and the other one wasn't. And then the very next day, it would switch. And I just realized I need to be thankful that they weren't just both fussy on the same day. And then that season passed. And another one of my favorite seasons was when we were still doing read alouds. You hit a certain level and the read alouds are not a thing anymore. At least they're not scheduled. Of course, you can still do them. But one of my absolute favorite memories, and this is just a multiple memory, traveling. Read alouds always came with us when we traveled, because we just can't put it down in the middle of the book. Now math, that can stay at home, but the read alouds always came. And it's just one of my favorite memories to be in the hotel room while we're traveling, snuggled up in bed after a day of doing whatever we were doing and continuing that read aloud time together. So amazing. So no matter what the season, enjoy it or pray through it, whatever it is. But the homeschool journey is just filled with all of these little seasons, and they're all put there for a reason. And that's all important to remember too. There's no accidents, there's no coincidences. And just prayerfully make your way through each one of those seasons.
Yeah, I love what you said about it, enjoying, even if it's something small, remembering that God's got this. Pray, when you need him, he's there with you, and enjoy those little moments, because they will go by fast. I think all of us would say that now that our kids are older, it feels like just yesterday that we had the little kindergartners on the couch snuggled up together, and now our kids are older than that. So yeah, enjoy those moments, and we will pray for you as well. I know we've said this in other sessions, but get into the Sonlight Connections app with us. If you need us to pray for you, if you want us to troubleshoot your issue, or share when those moments go really well to encourage other people within the Sonlight Connections community. And I get great ideas from seeing the photos you all share as well. So make sure that you're joining us. It's a really fun community. It's encouraging. So if you're worried about that, like, oh, am I going to be comparing myself? No, I think the Sonlight Connections community is so encouraging and uplifting. So if you need some support, we've got you in there. And make sure to join us tomorrow for our Making Strides session. Thanks for joining us today.